my name is Neil Patkar, and I am an alumnus from Balwanshid School of Architecture, Vile. So currently I am working at PG Patki Architects since 9th of October. And I've been working on a commercial high-rise building again after having done my design thesis on a commercial set of buildings. So my thesis topic was contemporary climate responsive architecture in the city of Mumbai. The reason I took up such a topic was because Mumbai faces a lot of problems such as humidity and heat. So how to tackle these problems, how to actually sort of find a contemporary answer for this is what my pitch is for in my thesis that I did. So in the metropolis of Mumbai, since many few years, like the usage of electricity and energy resources has shot off the charts, and this in turn is causing a lot of problems for the residents of the city as well as the suburbs and of the state and of the people who are staying in the state of Maharashtra. So earlier, if you see, like the resources and the design elements that were being used by the people in the state of Maharashtra were actually like cohering, and they actually adhered to the design problems and the climatic problems that the people actually faced at that time, with the usage of like windows, you have doors, you have verandas, you have fenestrations, but the usage of the material was quite different as to what it is there in the contemporary like scenario, what in the city of Mumbai. So at that time, the architecture that they used, the architectural elements that they used, the architecture thrived and survived throughout the centuries. But right now, if you look at the current scenario in Mumbai, you have all these huge glass boxes, you have ACP clad buildings. In those, you pump them up with constant air conditioning, you have constant electricity usage. So because of that, there's a lot of load that is actually falling on the energy consumption of the entire state. So South Bombay being one of the prestigious places in the city of Mumbai, the cost of electricity is the cheapest in the entire state, because you need constant supply of electricity to that area, and as you keep on going outwards, the cost of electricity actually keeps on increasing. But from that, the amount of electricity that is being used for air conditioning is drastically higher than which is being used for the other things. So if it's 60% of the energy is being used for electricity, and the respective for air conditioning, and the respective is actually used for something else. So how to tackle this? So on the basis of that, I gathered all my data from various sources, how the energy charts are there, what is the entire climate mapping of the city, what actually goes on there, what are the humidity levels, at different bands, what is the wind speed at different bands, what is the most favorable and the most liked and favored climate band for the people in the state of Maharashtra, or the state of Mumbai. So from that, I actually took excerpts from the book by Kevin Kelly. So in his book, actually what he states that mankind actually is going, so he has this term called Clockwork Logic, in which humans actually take reference from the nature, and they are finding how the nature actually works for the humans, because slowly what he had proposed at that time, so many years ago, 25 to 30 years ago, is that mankind is trying to learn from nature. It is trying to get all the patterns, all the codes from the nature, because the nature already exists. The nature is thriving. It has been going on since thousands of years, since millennia. So maybe it's time mankind actually started taking influence from the nature. From that, you have different branches such as biomimicry, taking reference from the actual system. So my influence was the rainforest. So why the rainforest is because if you see in a rainforest, there are actually three bands. One, you have the canopy layer, the understory layer, and the emergent layer. This being the emergent layer, then you have the canopy layer, then you have the understory layer. The bottommost one is the forest floor, but actually we're not considering considering that one. So each layer, each band will have its particular humidity content, it will have its particular flora and fauna characteristics, it will have microscopic characteristics and macroscopic characteristics. Each level will have its own wind load, it will have its own wind speed, it will have so the entire game, like it changes from band to band. So the topmost one being the emergent layer, which goes above 60 meters, it has the highest wind speed, but it has the least amount of humidity because you have the wind speed, so humidity gets dispersed over there because of the wind speed being there. The canopy one is, but you have harsh sunlight, so because in tropical regions you have harsh sunlight also. So the canopy layer, which is the middle one, it has the best suitable living conditions for almost all the animals and all the plants. So how does this entire system actually work? Now each layer has to take care of the other layer. The emergent layer, which is on the top, it has the least amount of it doesn't have to actually take care of the layer at the bottom in per se, because it has the smallest leaves. It has the smallest leaves because when it rains, the water has to reach down also. So this layer having the smallest leaves, the second layer being the canopy layer. Now this layer needs the water and the sunlight to go down. So for that, the canopy layer, which is the second layer from the top, has perforations in the leaves. So what I did was I actually took up three different plants. One was the yellow meranti, one is the elephant, the Swiss cheese plant, and the elephant leaf plant. So as you go from top to bottom, the color of the leaves also change. The top one being the lightest because they get more amount of sunlight and they are waxy leaves because there's more water, there's a lot of harsh sunlight and water on the top. The second one being a bit mildly green, and the bottom one being the darkest of all the colors. So now how do I study this? So I broke down the entire system even further. I went from the huge to the small to the microscopic level. So taking every single plant's leaves, the plant's composition, the structure is comprised of plural units called stomata, the singular being the stoma. So a stoma is actually nothing but an aperture which is there on the surface of the leaf for the transpiration of gases. It's to remove all the water vapor content that is present inside the leaf and to get fresh air inside, and so on and so forth, for carrying out photosynthesis and all the other processes. So the stomata actually fall, so you can, the stoma and the stomata can be described into different pathways. Like you have the stomatal density, you have the stomatal size, and you have the stomatal the difference between, or the actual reference between the both of them. So the stomatal size, if you consider the bottommost layer, which is going to be the understory layer in my entire pitch, over here you have the highest amount of humidity content. So now you want you don't want too much humidity to be present in the plants, because the plants actually want to remove it out. As you have the most amount of humidity, the transpiration needs to be there. So the size of the stomata at the bottommost layer is going to be the biggest, because you want so if you consider the entire rainforest analogy to actually a structure in the city of Mumbai, what actually happens is you want more wind speed and more wind at the bottommost layer, at the place where you have most amount of humidity. So the size of the stoma is going to be bigger and the stomatal numbers are going to be smaller. But as you keep on going higher, the wind speed is going to increase, so you have to take that also into account. So if there's more amount of wind speed, you don't want a lot of wind to enter inside, because then it might be uncomfortable for the people to work also. So the size of the stoma decreases, but the number of stomata actually keep on increasing. So from that I came up to all my references of how the stoma actually works. The research started, how the stomas actually function, what is the mechanism that goes behind it. So my pitch wasn't actually going to be a hydraulic system of opening and closing at that time, because I wanted a standard fixed facade for the entire structure. So from that I went on to a site. The site that I chose was Lower Parel, which is in South Bombay, and it being a major industrial district, you have a lot of commercial spaces over there. So my site which I chose was actually in a trapezoidal form over here, this being my main road. So the area close by, which has the famous Lodha World 1 towers. So how should I actually approach my project over here? Because in the rainforest, if you see in the project, in the entire study, the growth is actually abrupt, but the nature itself has a lot of control in it. So this is where I started pitching and forming different kinds of designs and formations. The simple one being a simple cuboid. So for the cuboid, if I have a normal cuboid just simply placed on site, how can I actually take the entire rainforest study and implement to this? So previously I started coming up with like different apertures for the building, for the structure, but even after doing these, as you can see in all the diagrams that I've so done, the problems that I was facing was my structure was still very massy and very blocky. So how do I actually cut that? How do I perforate the mass so well that there is enough for commercial working space inside, but I have a complete porous apertures on the outside as well. So from trying and testing out all these options, it was actually becoming very random. There was no complete control. So then I started implementing parameters to the structure. The simple parameter that I actually implemented was, if I have a cuboid, a block on site, say on a 1:1000 scale or a 1:100 scale, however placed, I make a niche on top. I chisel out my structure. It's actually chiseled, carved, half carving in the structure. I give a diagonal slit on that, and the slit actually comes down. So now this is being done on one part of the one corner of the structure. Now how do I replicate it on all four? One is done, now three are left. So how to have control over that? Now the other, so now I flip the block, and the other one that comes starts from here, comes down, but now the slit, the open slit which has a perforation from the inside, from the corner, how do I keep a control on that? So the another parameter that I set was the aperture can't be right beside it. If this one is in the bottommost part, the bottom half of the structure, the slit that comes on the adjacent side has to be on top, and I keep on changing as the block actually keeps on changing. So the other side, if you see over here, if I have slits over here and if this one is happening like that, from that side, this aperture can't be straight, so it comes over here, and accordingly on this side the slit comes over here. So after having had this made this parameter, establishing this parameter, how to actually go ahead with it, because still the structure was actually pretty blocky. These were just carved out on the structure, on like the facade of the building. Then came the third parameter, is like I connect these holes which are there on the corner slits internally. So you in plan, if you see over here, if there's a hole over here, over here, over here, over here, now I connect this one to here, this one to here, this one over here, and this one over here. And on top of that, the fourth parameter comes, I connect them diagonally from the inside as well. So over here, this one, if it's on the top corner, and this one if it's on the bottom corner, I have a connection and a passageway internally for this, and I have a connection for this. And in some spaces I get a complete void over here. So in this way I have wind flow, I have light flow in from all directions. Now this established the base study of how I can actually do it. So from this I actually put it on site, I implemented on site, then I started all the simulations in the Autodesk flow design software, which gives me how I can calculate the wind speed for my structure. How does my building fare if it's placed in a scenario of Mumbai? So previously I placed the entire solid block off my site in the and the structures were off that side. So after I placed this in that, the wind speed was going to be from this direction. Still, what was actually happening in 3D, if you can see in the diagrams, there were spirals that were getting formed behind that, and you have the Loda World one over exactly over here. So if there's high amount of wind spirals that will get formed, there are chances that the windows can actually fly away, because the wind speed at that time tend to be really high. So if the structure is going to be much higher than 110 meters, the wind speed tends to be higher than what is there on the ground level. So then I started splitting the block over here. Still the wind speed was actually same, the spirals were getting formed again. I split the block further, not much change again. Then I started splitting and I distanced them out. This gave me some leeway, but the spirals reduced. So now was, how do I actually control the wind? How I want the wind to enter my site also, because I wanted to have a plaza space at the bottom over here on the ground level, but at the same time I wanted it to have a good amount of shade at the bottom also, because Mumbai heat tends to be really harsh in summers and sometimes in winters also in the daytime. So shading that. So then I started giving chamfers to my building from the corners. So this happens to be my building, and this happens to be the other one. I started chamfering in from the sides. So when people walk from here and go inside, you have a nice entry space for the people, but you have shade which is being provided from the top as well. Now wind, how do I invite the wind in? Now as the simulations weren't working, I started chamfering and giving slits at the bottom. So if my block if you see in the elevation, it has a chamfer at the bottom. Now if I started giving the chamfers on the top first, what was happening was the spirals reduced, but I wanted the wind wasn't coming inside. But then at the same time I gave the chamfer and the vaultway at the bottom also. So by doing this, if I do it for more buildings which are there beside that, I have and the chamfers on the sides, I have a good local for people. I have a good market space at the bottom, so the entire the entire program gets divided in into bands and layers. You have the first public domain, then you have the semi-private, which being like the elevators on the areas for the approaching the entire structure. Then you have the completely private domain where you have all these office spaces and where people are, and co-working spaces where people are actually working. But still it becomes really blocky. For now, if you take the program, what is actually happening is people are not actually, so if I want to buy something, if I want to eat something, if I want to go into the public domain, I actually have to get down all the way from my structure. That is when the connection of all the buildings comes into play. So my buildings, if they are placed 3 in a row, if you see in the elevation, these having the chamfers, these having the chamfers on the top. Now I wouldn't want, if I'm on the 30th floor, I wouldn't want to come down all the way just to have a grade. So I started introducing cafeterias and public domains at different levels, and this in turn gave me connection from one building to another. So if I want to go from building 1 to building 6, it is up to me if I want to go down to the plaza space, enjoy the public domain, and from there enter the place entirely, or I can go down to one space, connect from one building number 1 to building number 2, from this connection walk away, take another place. So in this way you're being exposed to more work environments. You have the inclusion of semi-private and private, which is a bit closer to you, and I have the connection of the entire structure gets maintained. So now this connection in turns gets related to the rainforest that I had, which has branching, because the flora and fauna sometimes spread from one tree to another also. Like you have shrubs and bushes which actually grow from one, climbers and creepers. So in this way I try to maintain and retain the rainforest features. Now as to in terms of performity and how actually the structure fares in terms of energy consumption, like my hypothesis for this entire structure and this theme, this scheme, is not exactly about how it's not exactly about how this building is very site specific and that it's going to be just for this particular site in Lower Parel, but rather than that, it's actually for the entire design study and the approach that I took from the rainforest, the influence that I took from the rainforest, and tried to implement it to this climatic condition of hot and humid climate. So this can, tomorrow if there's a pitch for a project like this system, this performative design system can be done for another site also in that particular area pertaining to Lower Parel, because it is not just for this site. However, the design might change, the perforations might change according to the wind speed that you have. It's not like this design is like absolute and it's for this place only. You can change it, of course, but yeah, this is for the pitch for the entire project. And in terms of diagrams, in terms of model making, like what actually happens is like the material that I chose for my for the study models, which being the Oasis floral foam, it gave me a lot of liberty and freedom to carve through those spaces, because it was becoming really, I could control the material much more in terms of like say a POP block or a concrete block or a C4X block, because carving was much easier, the production was really faster. And from that, to present my design finally a thesis, I wanted the models to be carved in wood, because it gave that effect, the statement that I was trying to make in the model. So if you can see the model that I have, the final year design model, the part model also, and or the site model also. The site being in Lower Parel, there are some places where it's not dense, but in some places where you have these high rises which are coming over there. So like for the current students who are like actually out there, who are about to give their design dissertation, or who are about to start their design dissertation, like my take, I would like to say, like my take on my thesis was, and my approach was really broad at first, because it's like you have to enter a pool, say, and you have to find everything, you have to gather everything that you can, you have to collect all the data, you have to collect everything. then you have to skim through it. You have to reduce all the stuff that you don't want. You have to catch hold of things that are really important. You have to get hold of all the things that matter. So it's going to start from a really broad study, then slowly, like say like 2 weeks at a time, you can start skimming through. You can start letting go of the broad research. You can like pick points on the ones that you really matter, and over a period, so on the basis of how your course is structured, you can start your exploration in terms of hardcore research first. And so my thesis, it wasn't about how the form is actually going to be, because when I started it out, you have this rainforest system where it's so abrupt, where there's complete chaos, which is what it appears to be, but there's complete control of the nature over it. So I would say do not run behind the form of how the structure is going to look, because through your research, through your design study, your form will emerge. Your design and your study will dictate how your form is going to be. Because if you have a particular image in your mind, I want my project or want my design project to be in this way, you would limit a lot of things and you would lose out on a lot of processes of research, because maybe you could have found out much better things. So, and this being the way in which you are trying to find out something which is actually there in the nature, you are trying to decode the patterns which are actually there from like through biomimicry. And this is what I tried to do. Like there was no goal of how the project is actually going to look, but this is how it actually looks, and I think like it looks pretty decent. So yeah, thank you.